The sound of ceramic shattering echoed through the kitchen, and I froze mid-stir, the wooden spoon clinking against the edge of the pot. The tomato sauce I'd been simmering for dinner, Luke's favorite, bubbled over the sides, leaving a sticky red mess on the stove, but none of that mattered right now. Not when Luke was standing across from me, his face red with anger, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "How could you say that to him?" he roared, gesturing toward the living room where his son, Jax, was hiding. The 7-year-old had been moping all evening, refusing to eat the homework he'd forgotten to do, and when I gently told him he couldn't watch TV until it was finished, he'd thrown a tantrum, knocking over Jax's glass of milk in the process. I'd cleaned it up without a word. But Jax must have run to Luke with some twisted version of the story. "I didn't say anything cruel," I said, my voice steady even as my hands shook. "I just told him he needs to finish his homework first. You know the rules we agreed on." Luke and I had been together for 3 years, and when his ex-wife, Sarah, had moved to California for a job 6 months ago, we'd agreed to co-parent Jax together. I'd tried so hard to be the kind of stepmom Jax could trust, packing his lunch every morning with extra cookies, attending his soccer games even when it rained, staying up late helping him with math when Luke was stuck at work. But Luke wasn't listening. He took a step forward, his eyes blazing. And that's when he said it. The words that would split my world in two. "Don't act like you care about him. You're just a cold-hearted bitch who can't stand that he's not your real kid." The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the distant hum of the fridge, and Jax's quiet sniffles from the other room. I stared at Luke, the man I'd loved, the man I'd planned a future with, and suddenly he felt like a stranger. I'd endured Sarah's passive-aggressive texts, Jax's occasional hostility, and the late nights worrying if I was doing enough. But this accusation cut deeper than any of that. "I'm a cold-hearted bitch," I repeated, my voice rising. "I'm the one who wakes up at 6 a.m. to make his favorite pancakes because he hates the school cafeteria food. I'm the one who stayed home with him last week when he had the flu, even though I had a big presentation at work. I'm the one who loves you enough to try to love your son, and this is what I get." Luke's jaw tightened. "He's just a kid. Mia, you should have let it go." "Let it go," I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Let him throw a fit and break things. Let him learn that he can get away with anything because his dad will defend him no matter what. That's not kindness, Luke, that's neglect." He didn't say anything else. He just crossed his arms and glared at me, like I was the one who'd done something unforgivable. In that moment, I knew this would never work. No matter how hard I tried, I'd always be the outsider. The woman who wasn't Jax's real mom, the woman Luke would choose over me every single time. I put down the spoon and wiped my hands on my apron. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice calm now, too calm. Luke blinked, like he didn't believe me. "What, I'm leaving? Tonight?" I walked past him toward the bedroom, ignoring his calls. I grabbed the suitcase from the closet, the one I'd bought for our cancelled trip to Paris, and started throwing clothes inside. My passport, my wallet, my laptop, all the essentials went in first. Luke followed me, his anger fading into confusion. "Mia, stop, I didn't mean it like that." "You meant it exactly like that," I said, zipping up the suitcase. I grabbed my keys from the nightstand and turned to face him. "I've spent 3 years trying to prove that I'm not just some girl who's after you. 3 years trying to be part of your family, but you'll never see me as anything more than a threat to Jax, so I'm done." I walked out of the bedroom, past Jax, who was peeking around the corner, his eyes wide, and toward the front door. Luke grabbed my arm. "Where are you going? It's midnight." I pulled away from him. "Switzerland." It was an impulse, but it felt right. My grandma had left me a small apartment in Zurich when she died last year, and I'd always talked about visiting. Now, it felt like the perfect escape. "Don't call me, don't text me, just let me go." He stared at me, his mouth open, and for a second, I thought he might beg me to stay, but he didn't. He just stepped back. I opened the door, the cold night air hitting my face, and pulled my suitcase behind me. As I drove to the airport, I didn't look back, I didn't cry, I just turned up the radio and thought about Zurich, about the mountains, the chocolate, the quiet. A place where no one would call me a cold-hearted bitch, a place where I could finally be just me. The plane touched down in Zurich just as the sun was rising, painting the mountains pink and gold. I stared out the window, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, and felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks: peace. The flight attendant announced that the local time was 6 a.m., and I grabbed my suitcase from the overhead bin, my hands still shaky from the adrenaline of last night's escape. The airport was quiet, with only a few travelers milling around. I followed the signs to customs, my passport clutched tightly in my hand. The officer glanced at it, then at me, and asked a question in German. I smiled nervously. "I'm sorry, I don't speak German." "English," he nodded, his expression softening. "Purpose of your visit?" "I'm moving here," I said, surprised by how confident my voice sounded. It was true. When I'd bought the plane ticket last night, I'd decided this wasn't just a vacation, this was a fresh start. The officer stamped my passport and wished me well, and I walked out into the arrivals area, taking a deep breath of the crisp, mountain air. Grandma's apartment was in the Altstadt, the old town, and I'd arranged for a taxi to take me there. The driver chatted in broken English as we drove through the city, pointing out the Zurich Opera House, the Limmat River, the rows of colorful buildings with red-tiled roofs. When we pulled up to a narrow street lined with cobblestones, I felt a lump in my throat. Grandma had told me stories about this apartment, how she'd lived here as a young woman, how she'd met Grandpa at a cafe down the street. It felt like coming home, even though I'd never been here before. The apartment was on the third floor of a building with a wooden door and a small balcony. The key was waiting for me at the concierge's desk, and when I unlocked the door, I let out a gasp. It was small, just a living room, a bedroom, a kitchen, and a bathroom. But it was cozy, with hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out at the mountains. Grandma's old armchair was in the corner, covered in a knit blanket, and there was a shelf full of her books, all in German. Except for a few Agatha Christie novels, I dropped my suitcase and walked to the balcony, leaning against the railing. Below me, a bakery was opening, the smell of fresh bread drifting up. A couple walked by, holding hands, speaking in soft German, for the first time in years. I didn't feel like I was trying to fit in, I just felt present. That afternoon, I went to the phone store to buy a new SIM card. I'd turned off my old phone last night, and I didn't plan on turning it back on. The clerk, a young woman named Lena with pink hair, helped me choose a plan, and when she asked for my old number to transfer it, I shook my head. "I don't want to keep it," I said. "I want a new one. No one from the States needs to reach me." She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. Bless European privacy norms. And handed me a new phone. I put it in my pocket and walked to the grocery store, picking up milk, bread, and chocolate, because when in Switzerland, right? The next week was a blur of settling in. I found a part-time job at a cafe near the apartment. They needed someone who spoke English to help with tourist orders, and I started taking German lessons at a community center. The lessons were frustrating at first. I kept mixing up der, die, and das. But my teacher, Herr Müller, was patient, and the other students were friendly. There was a woman from Brazil named Sophia who was studying art, and a guy from Canada named Jake who was working as a ski instructor. We'd go for coffee after class, and they'd laugh at my terrible German accents. I didn't think about Luke much at first. When I did, it was just a dull ache, like a bruise that hadn't fully healed. I'd see a father and son at the cafe and feel a twinge of sadness, but then I'd remember the way he'd called me a cold-hearted bitch, and the sadness would fade into anger. I deleted all his photos from my laptop, threw away the hoodie he'd left at my apartment, and avoided the American news websites that might have any updates about his company. One night, I was sitting on the balcony, drinking tea and watching the stars, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number from the States. My heart skipped a beat. "Luke, Sarah." But I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail, then deleted the message without listening. Whatever they had to say, I didn't want to hear it. I'd built a new life here, a life where I didn't have to prove my worth to anyone, a life where I was just Mia, the girl from the cafe who loved mountains and bad German, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. A month later, I was closing up the cafe when a customer asked for directions to the Zurich Museum of Art. His accent was American. New York, maybe, and I helped him map it out on his phone. As he thanked me, he paused. Wait, do I know you? You look familiar. I tensed up, hoping it wasn't someone from Luke's circle. I don't think so, I said, forcing a smile. I just moved here from Chicago. He nodded, not seeming suspicious, and walked away. I let out a breath and locked the door behind him. It was a reminder. No matter how far I ran, there was always a chance someone from my old life would find me. But as I walked home, the mountains towering above me, I knew I was ready. If Luke ever did find me, he'd see that I'd changed. I wasn't the same girl who'd cried over his accusations. I was stronger now, and I wasn't going back. 6 months in Zurich, and I'd finally stopped checking over my shoulder every time I heard an American accent. I'd gotten promoted at the cafe to manager. My German was good enough to hold a conversation without panicking, and I'd even joined a hiking club with Sophia and Jake. Life was steady, predictable, exactly what I'd wanted when I'd fled Chicago. But predictability has a way of getting boring, and by October, I was starting to feel a little restless. That's why, when Sophia suggested we go to the Oktoberfest celebration in Lucerne, I jumped at the chance. Lucerne was a 2-hour train ride from Zurich, and we spent the trip laughing and drinking apple cider. Sophia told me about her latest art project, a series of paintings of the Swiss lakes, and Jake complained about the tourists who kept asking him to take their photos on the slopes. By the time we arrived, the town square was packed with people wearing lederhosen and dirndls, drinking beer from giant steins and listening to a brass band. We bought pretzels the size of our heads and found a spot near the stage, dancing to the music even though we had no idea what the lyrics meant. It was around 4 p.m. when I went to get us another round of drinks. The beer tent was crowded, and I had to squeeze past a group of guys in matching baseball caps. As I waited at the bar, someone tapped me on the shoulder. Mia, is that really you? I froze. That voice, deep, familiar, with a hint of the Chicago accent I tried to forget. I turned around, and my stomach dropped. It was Ryan, Luke's best friend. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, his hair a little longer than I remembered, and he was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. Ryan, I said, my voice tight. What are you doing here? I'm here for a conference, he said, still staring. Work stuff. I can't believe it's you. Luke's been going crazy looking for you. My chest tightened. I told him not to look for me. Ryan nodded, his expression sympathetic. I know, he told me what he said. He's been kicking himself ever since. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help the flicker of curiosity. How is he? A mess, Ryan said, leaning against the bar. He stopped going out with the guys. Works all the time. Jax has been acting out, too. Refuses to do his homework. Fights with Sarah when she comes to visit. Luke thinks it's because you left. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it away. Jax's behavior wasn't my fault. Luke's was, for choosing to believe his son over me. What about Sarah? I asked, changing the subject. Ryan shrugged. She moved back to Chicago last month. Said she missed Jax too much. She's been helping Luke with him. But it's tense. She still doesn't like you. By the way, I laughed. Shocker. We talked for another 10 minutes. Ryan filling me in on the details of my old life. The neighbors who'd asked where I went, Luke's sister who'd called me a coward for leaving, the way Jax still asked for the extra cookies I used to pack in his lunch. Every word made my chest feel heavier, but I couldn't stop listening. It was like looking at a photo album of a life I'd left behind. Familiar, but not mine anymore. He really is sorry, Mia, Ryan said. Before I left, he's been talking about coming to Europe to find you. I told him it was a bad idea, but, he's stubborn. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Tell him not to bother. I finally said, I'm happy here. Ryan sighed. I'll try, but you know Luke, he doesn't give up easily. I walked back to Sophia and Jake, my beer sloshing in the stein. They could tell something was wrong. Who was that? Sophia asked. An old friend, I said, forcing a smile. From Chicago. Jake raised an eyebrow. The ex. I nodded, and he put his arm around my shoulder. Want to go ride the Ferris wheel? It'll take your mind off things. The Ferris wheel was at the edge of town, overlooking the lake. As we rose higher, the view got better. Lucerne spread out below us, the lake sparkling like a sheet of silver, the mountains in the distance. Jake pointed out the chapel bridge with its painted roof, and Sophia took photos of the sunset. For a minute, I forgot about Ryan, about Luke, about the life I'd left behind. I just felt the wind in my hair and the warmth of my friends beside me. But when we got back to Zurich that night, the feeling was gone. I unlocked my apartment and turned on the lights, the silence pressing in on me. I thought about Ryan's words, Luke going crazy looking for me, Jax missing my cookies, and I felt a wave of confusion. Had I done the right thing by leaving? Should I have stayed and fought for Luke, for Jax? I walked to the balcony and stared at the mountains, trying to find the peace I'd felt when I first arrived. But it was gone, replaced by a nagging doubt. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I didn't have Luke's number anymore. I'd deleted it months ago. But I still had his sister's number, his mom's number, even Sarah's number. I hovered over Sarah's contact, my finger shaking. I wanted to ask about Jax, to make sure he was okay, but then I remembered the way Luke had called me a cold-hearted bitch, the way he'd chosen Jax over me without even asking for my side of the story. I put the phone down and walked to the kitchen, making myself a cup of tea. I was happy here. I was strong here. I didn't need Luke, or Jax, or anyone from my old life. But as I drank my tea, I couldn't help but wonder, what if they needed me, a week later? I was at work when the bell above the cafe door rang. I looked up, and my heart stopped. It was Sarah. She was standing in the doorway, wearing a trench coat and looking like she'd been crying. For a second, I thought about hiding in the back, but it was too late. She'd already seen me. "Mia," she said, walking toward me. "I need to talk to you." I stared at Sarah across the cafe table, my hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate. The cafe was empty except for an old couple reading newspapers in the corner, and the soft jazz playing on the speakers felt too loud. Sarah looked terrible. Her eyes were red, her hair was messy, and she kept twisting a ring on her finger like she was nervous. I'd asked Lena to take over the counter so we could talk. And now I was regretting it. I didn't want to hear what she had to say. I didn't want to be pulled back into that life. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice flat. Sarah took a sip of her tea, her hands shaking. "Ryan told Luke he saw you here. Luke didn't believe him at first, but I begged him to let me come check. I flew here yesterday, rented a hotel room, and started going to every cafe in the Altstadt. I'm glad I found you." I raised an eyebrow. "Why are you glad? Last time we talked, you called me a homewrecker and told me to stay away from your son." Sarah flinched. "I was wrong about all of it. I thought you were just some girl trying to steal Luke from me. But you weren't. You cared about Jax more than I did." Sometimes, I leaned back in my chair, surprised. Sarah had never been one to admit she was wrong. When she and Luke had gotten divorced, she'd blamed him for everything. His long hours, his lack of commitment, even the fact that Jax hated broccoli. To hear her apologize was shocking. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked, cutting to the chase. She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "I need your help. Jax he's not doing well. Ever since you left, he's been having nightmares. He won't sleep in his own bed, he won't eat, he keeps asking where you are. Luke's tried everything. Therapy, toys, even taking him to Disney World. But nothing works. He just keeps saying, 'I want Mia.'" My chest tightened. I thought about Jax, his messy brown hair, his obsession with dinosaurs, the way he'd sneak into my bed on Sunday mornings to watch cartoons. I thought about the time he'd fallen off his bike and scraped his knee, and how he'd run to me instead of Luke to get a Band-Aid. I'd thought he hated me, after that night in the kitchen. But maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just scared. "Why didn't Luke come here himself?" I asked. Sarah looked away. "He's ashamed. He knows he messed up. He wanted to come. But I told him it was better if I did. I thought you'd be more likely to listen to me." I laughed, a bitter sound. "You thought wrong. I left because Luke called me a cold-hearted bitch. I left because he chose his son over me without even asking for my side of the story. Why would I go back to that? Because Jax needs you," Sarah said, leaning forward. "And Luke needs you. I've never seen him like this. Mia, he works all day, comes home, and sits in your old chair. He still has the tomato sauce recipe you wrote down for him. He tries to make it every Sunday, but it never tastes right. He's not sleeping. He's not eating. He's a shell of himself." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Luke, the man who'd been so angry with me, was falling apart without me. It didn't make sense. "What about you?" I asked. "What do you get out of this? If I go back, you'll have to share Jax with me again. You'll have to see me every day." Sarah shrugged. "I don't care about that anymore. I just want my son to be happy. And if that means you coming back, then so be it. I was selfish before, Mia. I thought Jax was mine, that Luke was mine, but I was wrong. You're part of their family, whether I like it or not." We talked for another hour. Sarah told me about Jax's therapy sessions, about how he'd told his therapist that he was scared I'd never come back. She told me about Luke's failed attempts to date other women, how he'd gone on one date with a coworker and left halfway through because she'd mentioned liking tomato sauce, and it had made him cry. She told me about the way Jax still kept the extra cookie I'd packed in his lunch in his backpack, even though it was stale. By the time she left, I was confused. Part of me wanted to jump on the next plane to Chicago, part of me wanted to slam the door in her face and never think about them again. Sarah gave me her phone number before she left. "Call me if you change your mind," she said. "Luke will come get you, anytime, day or night." I nodded, but I didn't promise anything. That night, I went hiking with Sophia and Jake. We climbed up to a viewpoint overlooking Zurich, and as we watched the sunset, I told them everything. Sophia was furious. "Are you kidding me? He called you a cold-hearted bitch, and now you're thinking about going back," she said. Jake was more calm. "It's your choice, Mia. But you have to be honest with yourself. Do you want to go back because you miss Luke, or because you feel guilty about Jax?" I didn't have an answer. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about Jax's face, about Luke's smile, about the life we'd built together. I thought about the apartment in Zurich, about the cafe, about my friends. I had two lives, one that was safe and steady, and one that was messy and complicated, but filled with love. Which one did I want? The next morning, I woke up with a headache. I checked my phone, and there was a text from Sarah. It was a photo of Jax, sitting on a swing in the park, holding a stuffed dinosaur I'd bought him for his birthday. The caption read, "He asked if you'd come push him." I stared at the photo for a long time, then I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "I'll think about it," I said, when she answered, "But I need time, and if I come back, things have to be different. Luke has to apologize, properly, and he has to trust me." Sarah's voice was filled with relief. "He will, I promise." I hung up the phone and walked to the balcony. The mountains were covered in a light dusting of snow, and the bakery below was opening. The smell of fresh bread drifting up. I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs. I didn't know if going back was the right choice. But I knew one thing. Jax needed me, Luke needed me, and maybe, just maybe, I needed them too. I didn't call Sarah back, not for 3 days. I spent those days going through the motions, working at the cafe, taking German lessons, hiking with Sophia and Jake. But my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying that night in the kitchen, Luke's words echoing in my head. I kept looking at the photo of Jax on the swing, his little face sad and hopeful. I kept thinking about the apartment in Zurich, about how safe it felt here, and how scared I was to go back to the mess in Chicago. On the 4th day, I was closing up the cafe when the bell rang. I looked up, expecting a last-minute customer, and froze. It was Luke. He was standing in the doorway, wearing a black coat and a beanie, his face pale from the cold. He looked thinner than I remembered, his eyes dark circles under them. But he was still the same Luke, same smile, same way of standing with his hands in his pockets when he was nervous. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I'd imagined this moment 100 times. Him showing up, begging for my forgiveness, telling me he loved me. But now that it was happening, I didn't know what to say. "Mia," he said, his voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I walked to the door and locked it, even though it was already closed. Lena had left an hour ago, so we were alone. I led him to the table in the corner where Sarah and I had sat, and we sat down. The silence was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the wind blowing outside, his quiet breathing. "I'm sorry," he said, finally. I'm so sorry, Mia, I shouldn't have called you that. I shouldn't have believed Jax without asking you. I shouldn't have let you leave. His voice cracked, and he looked away. I've been a mess without you. Jax has been a mess, every day. I think about that night, and I hate myself. I hate that I pushed you away. I stared at him, trying to find the anger I'd felt for months, but it was gone, replaced by something softer, sadness, maybe, or longing. Why did you do it? I asked. Why did you believe Jax over me? We'd been together for 3 years. Luke, you knew me. You knew I'd never hurt him. He looked back at me, his eyes filled with tears. I was scared. Sarah had just moved to California, and I was worried Jax would feel abandoned. When he came to me crying, saying you'd yelled at him, I panicked. I thought if I didn't defend him, he'd hate me. I thought I was being a good dad, but I wasn't. I was being a terrible partner. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. I thought about that, about how scared Luke had been when Sarah left, about how he'd spent nights lying awake worrying if he was doing a good job as a single dad. I'd seen that fear in him, and I tried to reassure him, but I guess it hadn't been enough. Jax told you I yelled at him? I asked. Luke nodded. He said you called him a bad kid and told him no one loved him. I gasped. I never said that. I told him he needed to finish his homework before watching TV. He threw a tantrum and knocked over his milk, and I cleaned it up. That's it. Luke closed his eyes. I know, Jax told me the truth last month. He said he lied because he was mad at you. He said he thought if he told me you were mean, I'd make you leave, and Sarah would come back. I wanted to call you, but I didn't know how. I didn't know if you'd even want to talk to me. My heart broke for Jax. He'd been so scared, so confused, that he'd lied to his dad to try to get his mom back. I thought about the way he'd clung to me after he fell off his bike, about the way he'd asked me to read him bedtime stories. He'd trusted me, and I'd left him. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked Luke. He shrugged. I was ashamed. I thought if I told you Jax had lied, you'd think I was making excuses. I thought you'd never forgive me. I stared at him, trying to decide if I could I forgive him for calling me a cold-hearted bitch? For choosing his son over me, for letting me leave without trying to stop me, and more importantly, could I trust him not to do it again? What about us? I asked. If I go back, what happens then? Do we just pretend that night never happened? Do we go back to the way things were? Luke leaned forward, taking my hand. His hand was cold, but his touch was familiar. No, he said, we don't pretend. We talk, we go to couples therapy, we figure out how to co-parent Jax together, properly, this time. I'll never choose Jax over you again, Mia, because you're part of our family, you're his stepmom, and you're my partner. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I looked down at our hands. His fingers were intertwined with mine, just like they used to be. I thought about the apartment in Zurich, about the cafe, about my friends. I thought about Jax, about how much he needed me. I thought about Luke, about how sorry he was, about how much I still loved him. I need time, I said, pulling my hand away. I can't just pack my bags and go back with you. I have a life here now, a good life. Luke nodded, his expression sad but understanding. I know, I'm not asking you to come back today. I'm just asking you to think about it, to give me a second chance, to give us a second chance. He took a piece of paper out of his pocket and handed it to me. It was his hotel room number and phone number. I'm staying here for a week. Call me if you change your mind, anytime. He stood up, and for a second, I thought he might hug me, but he didn't. He just nodded and walked toward the door. I miss you, Mia, he said. Before leaving, I stared at the door long after he was gone, the piece of paper clutched in my hand. I walked to the balcony and looked out at the mountains. It was snowing lightly, the flakes drifting down slowly. I thought about Luke's words, about his apology, about the way he'd looked at me, like I was the most important thing in the world. I thought about Jax, about his sad little face in the photo. I thought about my life in Zurich, about how safe it was, but safe wasn't always happy. Sometimes, happy was messy. Sometimes, happy was taking a chance on the person you loved, even if they'd hurt you. That night, I called Sophia and Jake over. I told them about Luke's visit, about his apology, about Jax's lie. Sophia was still against it. He hurt you, Mia. You can't just forgive him that easily. Jake was more supportive. If you love him, and you think he's changed, then you should give him a chance. But you have to do it for yourself, not for Jax, not for Sarah, for you. I thought about that. For me, did I want to go back? Did I want to try again with Luke? I looked at the piece of paper with his hotel number on it. I picked up my phone. I didn't call him, but I didn't throw the paper away either. I put it on the nightstand, next to my bed. Maybe, just maybe, a second chance was worth it. I didn't call Luke for 3 days. Instead, I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts at the cafe and even offering to train the new part-timer. A shy college student from Berlin named Lila. I'd rearrange the pastry display until every croissant was perfectly aligned, count the cash register 3 times even when it balanced on the first try, and linger by the door long after closing. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind off the crumpled piece of paper on my nightstand. Sophia noticed, of course. She dropped by the cafe on Wednesday afternoon, sliding into a booth with a paper cup of espresso from the shop down the street. "You're avoiding it," she said, no preamble. I wiped down the counter, pretending to focus on a smudge of chocolate. Avoiding what? Luke, the phone call, the fact that you're still in love with him even though he's an idiot. I froze, then sighed and slid into the booth across from her. I'm not in love with him, I'm confused. Confused doesn't make you stay up until 2 a.m. reorganizing your spice rack, she said, raising an eyebrow. Confused doesn't make you flinch every time the phone rings. You miss him, Mia, and you miss Jax. Stop pretending otherwise. Before I could argue, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. My heart skipped a beat. Luke, but when I pulled it out, the screen showed Sarah's name. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Sophia nodded. Answer it. Whatever it is, you need to hear it. I took a deep breath and swiped to answer. Hello, Sarah's voice was frantic, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Mia, it's Jax. He's in the hospital. He has a high fever, and they can't figure out what's wrong. He won't stop asking for you. Please, can you come? My blood ran cold. Jax, hospital. Those words bounced around my head like a broken record. I could see his face, grinning as he ate his pancakes, pouting when I made him finish his math homework, clinging to me after his bike fall. Which hospital? I asked, my voice steady even as my hands shook. Children's Memorial in Chicago. Please, Mia. He's scared. I hung up and stared at Sophia. Jax is in the hospital. I need to go. She didn't argue this time. She just squeezed my hand. Go, we'll cover the cafe. Jake and I can take your shifts, and Lila's a quick learner. Your apartment's paid up until the end of the month. We'll pack your things and ship them if you decide to stay. Just be careful. Don't let him hurt you again. I nodded, then stood up and ran to the back to grab my jacket and purse. As I rushed out the door, I passed Luke standing on the sidewalk, his face ashen. He must have gotten the call too. You're coming, he said, not a question. I nodded. We need to get to the airport. Now. He didn't say anything, just grabbed my hand and led me to a taxi he'd already waiting. The ride to the airport was silent, but it wasn't the awkward silence from the cafe. It was the kind of silence that comes when 2 people are focused on the same thing. On a little boy in a hospital bed who needed them. Luke held my hand the whole time, his grip tight like he was scared I'd disappear again. I didn't pull away. The flight to Chicago was 10 hours, and I didn't sleep a minute. Luke filled me in on what Sarah had told him. Jax had woken up Tuesday night complaining of a headache, then spiked a fever of 104. By morning, he was lethargic and disoriented. So Sarah had taken him to the ER. They'd run tests, but nothing had come back yet. He kept asking for you, Luke said, staring out the window at the clouds. Sarah said every time the nurse comes in, he asks if it's you. I feel so useless. I put my hand on his arm. You're not useless. You're here. That's what matters. When we landed, Luke's sister, Emma, was waiting for us at the airport with her car. She hugged me tightly when she saw me, which surprised me. She'd called me a coward for leaving. After all, I'm sorry about what I said, she whispered. I didn't know the whole story. Luke told me about Jax's lie. You didn't deserve that. I nodded, too tired to talk. The drive to the hospital was quick, and as we walked through the doors of the pediatric wing, My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. Sarah was sitting in the waiting room, her eyes red and puffy. She stood up when she saw us, rushing over to hug Luke. Then she turned to me, and for a second, I thought she might hug me too. Instead, she just said, "He's in room 307, he's asleep now, but the nurse said he might wake up soon." I walked toward the room, my legs feeling like lead. Luke followed behind me. When I pushed open the door, my breath caught in my throat. Jax was lying in the hospital bed, his face pale, and four in his arm. His messy brown hair was matted to his forehead, and he was clutching the stuffed dinosaur I'd bought him. Its fur was worn thin, and one eye was hanging loose, but he still held it tight. I walked over to the bed and sat down in the chair next to it, reaching out to brush a strand of hair off his forehead. It was burning hot. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw me, his face lit up, just a little, but it was enough to make my eyes fill with tears. "Mia," he whispered. "You're here." "I'm here," I said, squeezing his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." He closed his eyes, then opened them again, his lower lip trembling. "I'm sorry. I lied to Daddy. I said you were mean, but you weren't. I just wanted Mommy to come back. I didn't mean to make you leave." My heart broke. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. "I know, buddy, it's okay. I forgive you. And I'm sorry I left. I should have stayed and talked to you." Luke stood in the doorway, his hand over his mouth, tears streaming down his face. For the first time since that night in the kitchen, everything felt like it might be okay. Not perfect, not fixed, but okay. The nurse came in a few minutes later, smiling when she saw Jax awake and holding my hand. "Looks like our little fighter's feeling better," she said. "We got the test results back. He has a severe sinus infection that spread to his chest. We're putting him on a stronger antibiotic, and he should be home in a few days." Sarah and Emma came in too, and for a minute, we all stood around Jax's bed. Me, Luke, Sarah, Emma. No arguments, no tension, just four people who loved a little boy. It was a small moment, but it felt big, like a new beginning. Luke walked me to my old apartment that night. He'd kept paying the rent, even after I left, just in case. The furniture was the same, the walls still covered with the photos we'd taken together. The kitchen counter still had the recipe for tomato sauce I'd written down. It felt like coming home, but not quite, like a house that had been empty for a while, waiting for someone to make it warm again. "I know you need time," Luke said, standing in the doorway, "and I'll wait as long as it takes, but I want you to know, this is still your home. I'm still your person, if you'll let me be." I looked at him, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel scared. I felt hopeful. "I'll stay," I said, "for Jax, for us. Let's try again." He smiled, his real smile, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and pulled me into a hug. It was warm and familiar, and exactly where I belonged. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee drifting through the apartment. I'd crashed on the couch after Luke dropped me off, too exhausted to make it to the bedroom. And when I opened my eyes, he was standing in the kitchen, wearing my old world's best pancake maker apron, a gift from Jax for Mother's Day. Even though I wasn't his mom, and stirring a pot on the stove, the sight made my chest ache. In a good way, it was like stepping back in time, before the fight, before Switzerland, before everything fell apart. "Morning," he said, turning around with a smile. "I made oatmeal, Jax's favorite, with extra brown sugar. Thought we could take it to the hospital." I nodded, sitting up and rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Thanks. How's he doing?" Luke's smile faded a little. Sarah texted at 5 a.m. "He slept through the night, but his fever's still there. The nurse said they're increasing the antibiotic dose today." I stood up and walked to the kitchen, grabbing a mug of coffee from the counter. The warmth seeped into my hands, and I took a slow sip. "I'll go shower. Be ready in 10. The hospital was busier than it had been the night before. We walked through the pediatric wing, passing kids in superhero pajamas being pushed in wheelchairs and parents sitting on benches, looking worried. When we reached room 307, Sarah was sitting in the chair next to Jax's bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when we walked in, offering a small smile. "He just woke up, refused to eat until I told him you were coming." Jax turned his head toward us, his eyes lighting up when he saw the oatmeal. "Mia, Did you make it? I laughed, walking over to the bed. Luke did. But I supervised. Promise it's not burnt. Feeding Jax was a team effort. Luke held the bowl. I spooned the oatmeal into his mouth, and Sarah wiped his chin when he spilled. It was the kind of quiet, domestic moment I'd dreamed of when Sarah first moved to California. All of us working together. No drama, no tension. After he finished eating, the nurse came in to check his vitals. Fever's down to 101, she said, writing on a chart. That's a good sign. We'll check back in an hour. Jax frowned, pulling the covers up to his chin. I'm bored. I rummaged through my purse and pulled out a coloring book and a pack of crayons, something I'd grabbed from the cafe before leaving Zurich, just in case. How about we color a dinosaur? I bet we can make it look scarier than the one on your stuffed animal. Jax perked up, and we spent the next hour coloring. Luke sat on the edge of the bed, helping Jax stay within the lines, and Sarah sat on the couch, watching us with a soft smile. Every once in a while, Jax would lean his head on my shoulder, and I'd feel Luke's eyes on me, warm, grateful, like he couldn't believe I was really there. It felt good, but it also felt fragile, like one wrong move could shatter the peace we'd found. Around noon, Sarah stood up and stretched. I need to run home and grab some clothes. I'll be back in an hour. Luke nodded, and she walked to the door. Before she left, she turned to me. Mia, can I talk to you outside for a second? My heart skipped a beat. I'd been waiting for this, for her to backtrack, to tell me she didn't actually want me around, to start a fight. But when we stepped into the hallway, she just hugged me. Thank you, she said, her voice tight, for coming back, for being here for him. I don't say it enough, but I'm glad you're part of his life. I hugged her back. Surprised. Thanks, Sarah. I'm glad too. When we went back into the room, Luke was sitting in the chair next to Jax, who was asleep. He stood up and walked over to me, lowering his voice. Can we talk, outside? I nodded, and we walked to the waiting room. We sat down on a bench, and he took my hand. I know we said we'd take it slow, but I miss this. I miss us. Waking up, making breakfast, taking care of Jax together. I want this to be our life again, Mia, for good. I stared at him, my heart racing. I wanted it too, more than anything, but I was scared that he'd go back to choosing Jax over me. Scared that Sarah would change her mind, scared that the peace we'd found was just temporary. I want it too, I said, finally. But we need to set rules, no more assuming the worst, no more choosing sides without talking, and we need to include Jax in this. He's scared, Luke. He lied because he thought he had to choose between us and Sarah. We need to make sure he knows he doesn't have to. Luke nodded, squeezing my hand. Whatever you want, couples therapy, family therapy, anything. I just don't want to lose you again. Before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. I excused myself and walked to the vending machine area to answer. How's the kid? She asked, her voice warm. Better. Fever's down. He colored a dinosaur with me this morning. Sophia laughed. Of course he did. You were always the dinosaur whisperer. Listen, I shipped your things to Luke's house. They should arrive tomorrow. The cafe's doing fine. By the way, Lila's a natural. And Jake and I have been covering the manager shifts. You don't have to worry about anything here. I felt a lump in my throat. Sophia had been my rock in Zurich, and now she was letting me go back to the life I'd left. Thank you, I said, my voice cracking, for everything. I'll visit, I promise. You better, she said, and if Luke hurts you again, I'm flying to Chicago and kicking his ass. Got it, I laughed, wiping away a tear. Got it. When I went back to the waiting room, Luke was standing by the door, watching me. Everything okay? I nodded, walking over to him. My things are being shipped here. Sophia said the cafe's fine. He smiled, pulling me into a hug. Good, because I want you to move back in, not just for Jax, for us. The apartment feels empty without you. I hugged him back, breathing in his scent, coffee and pine, the way he always smelled. Okay, I said, I'll move in. He pulled away, grinning, and kissed me. It was soft, gentle, like he was scared I'd pull away. I didn't. I kissed him back, and for a second, all the fear, all the doubt, all the pain of the past few months faded away. There was just us, Luke and me, together again. We went back to Jax's room, and he woke up a few minutes later. "Did you kiss Mia?" he asked, squinting at us. Luke and I both blushed, and Sarah laughed from the couch. "Maybe," Luke said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Jax grinned. "Good, because I want her to stay, forever." My heart felt full. So full it hurt. I walked over to the bed and sat down, brushing his hair off his forehead. "I'm staying, buddy, forever." He closed his eyes, smiling, and snuggled into the covers. Luke sat next to me, taking my hand, and Sarah smiled at us from across the room. For the first time in a long time, everything felt right. Jax was getting better, Luke was trying, Sarah was being kind. It was messy, it was complicated, but it was ours, and that was enough. That night, Luke and I stayed at the hospital until visiting hours ended. Sarah went home to get some sleep, and we sat next to Jax's bed, talking quietly. We talked about the past, about the fight, about how scared we'd both been, and about the future, about family therapy, about Jax's upcoming soccer game, about how we'd make tomato sauce together this Sunday. When the nurse came in to tell us it was time to leave, Jax grabbed my hand. "Don't go," he said, his voice small. "I'll be back first thing in the morning," I said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "I promise. And Luke will be here bright and early with pancakes." Jax nodded. Letting go of my hand, Luke and I walked out of the hospital, hand in hand, the cool Chicago air hitting our faces. "We're really doing this," he said, smiling. "We are," I said, and for the first time in months, I believed it. Jax came home from the hospital on Friday afternoon, wrapped in a dinosaur-patterned hoodie that swallowed his still slender frame. Luke carried him through the front door, and Jax immediately squirmed out of his arms, darting toward the living room where I'd set up a blanket fort with his favorite pillows and stuffed animals. "It's bigger than the hospital bed," he yelled. Crawling inside and popping his head out like a groundhog, Luke and I exchanged a smile. This was the Jax we'd missed, the one who turned every moment into an adventure. The first week at home was a blur of chicken soup, naps, and board games. Jax was still tired from his hospital stay, so we kept things low-key. Luke worked from home, his laptop set up on the kitchen table so he could keep an eye on Jax while I ran errands and cooked. On Saturday morning, Jax begged for pancakes, my famous blueberry ones, and we made them together, Jax dumping far too much sugar into the batter and laughing as it spilled onto the counter. "It's extra sweet for my extra brave boy," I said, wiping flour off his cheek. He beamed, and Luke snapped a photo with his phone. The kind of candid shot that used to fill our photo albums before I left. Sarah came over every evening to check on Jax, and each time, she stayed a little longer. She'd help with dinner, or read Jax a bedtime story, or sit on the couch with us and watch a movie. It was strange, but nice, like we'd finally figured out how to be a family, even if it was an unconventional one. On Sunday, we made the tomato sauce I'd written down for Luke. And Sarah even brought over her mom's recipe for garlic bread to go with it. "I've never made it with fresh basil before," she said, chopping the leaves while Jax sat on the counter, stealing pieces of cheese. "Mia's secret ingredient," Luke said. Wrapping his arm around my waist, I leaned into him, and for a second, I forgot all about the fight, about Switzerland, about the months of pain. This was perfect. But perfect doesn't last forever. On Monday morning, I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard Sarah and Luke arguing in the kitchen. I froze, the shirt in my hand crumpling. I hadn't heard them fight since Sarah moved back to Chicago. They'd been so careful, so determined to keep the peace for Jax. I tiptoed to the door. "Listening, you can't keep putting this off, Luke," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "We need to talk about it before Jax goes back to school." "Not now," Luke said, his voice low. "Mia's here, and Jax is still recovering. That's exactly why we need to talk about it now. She has a right to know." My heart raced. Who had a right to know what? I pushed the door open a little, just enough to see them. Sarah was standing by the sink, her arms crossed, and Luke was leaning against the counter, his face tense. "Know what?" I asked, stepping into the kitchen. Both of them turned around, surprised. Sarah's face paled, and Luke ran a hand through his hair, looking guilty. "Mia, it's not a big deal," he said, but his voice was unconvincing. Sarah shook her head. "It is a big deal. She should have known weeks ago." I walked over to Luke, my hands shaking. Know what, Sarah? She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine. I'm moving to New York, next month. I got a promotion at work. They offered me the regional manager position, and it's too good to pass up. I stared at her. New York, that was across the country. Jax would only see her on weekends, on holidays. Just like before, I thought about Jax's lie, about how scared he'd been that Sarah would leave him. How could she do this? What about Jax? I asked, my voice tight. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I've thought about it a lot. I'll fly back every other weekend to see him. And he can come visit me during school breaks. I'll video call him every night. He's 7, Sarah, I said, cutting her off. He needs his mom, not a video call, not a weekend visit. He needs you here. Luke put his hand on my shoulder. Mia, she's thought this through. It's a great opportunity for her. Opportunity, I said, turning to him. What about Jax's opportunity to have both parents around? You were so scared he'd feel abandoned when she moved to California. And now you're just going to let her leave again? After everything we've been through, Luke's face hardened. It's not my decision to make. Mia, Sarah's his mom. She gets to choose what's best for her. But what about what's best for Jax? I asked. Jax had just gotten over his fever, just gotten used to having both Sarah and me around, just started to feel safe again. If Sarah left, he'd fall apart. I knew it. I am doing what's best for Jax, Sarah said, her voice cracking. This promotion means I can give him more, better schools, better clothes, a college fund. I'm not abandoning him. Mia, I'm doing this for him. I didn't believe her, not really. She'd left once before, and now she was leaving again. Jax would think it was his fault. Just like he'd thought my leaving was his fault. We argued for another hour. Luke defended Sarah, Sarah defended her decision, and I defended Jax. By the time Sarah left, I was exhausted. I walked to Jax's room, where he was playing with his dinosaurs on the floor. He looked up at me, smiling. Can we go to the park tomorrow? Daddy said I'm better enough. I knelt down next to him, brushing his hair off his forehead. Of course we can. Buddy. He went back to his dinosaurs, and I sat there, watching him. I couldn't tell him about Sarah, not yet, not when he was so happy, so full of hope. That night, Luke and I lay in bed, the room dark and quiet. Jax had fallen asleep hours ago, his stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. I'm sorry you found out that way, Luke said, his voice soft. I turned away from him, staring at the wall. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know how. I didn't want to upset you, not when we were finally getting back to normal, I said, laughing bitterly. Luke, normal is Sarah leaving, Jax lying to us, me running to Switzerland, that's our normal. He reached for me, but I pulled away. I'm scared, I said, my voice breaking. I'm scared that if Sarah leaves, Jax will go back to acting out. I'm scared that you'll choose him over me again. I'm scared that this, us, was just a temporary thing, something that only worked because Jax was in the hospital. Luke turned me around, his hands on my face. This is real, Mia, I love you. I'm not going to choose Jax over you, not ever. And Sarah leaving, it's hard, but we'll get through it, together. We'll talk to Jax, we'll go to family therapy, we'll do whatever it takes. I'm not letting you go again. I stared at him, his face illuminated by the moonlight. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But I'd been hurt before, and I was scared to let my guard down. Promise? I asked. He kissed me, soft and gentle. I promise. I closed my eyes, leaning into him. Maybe he was right. Maybe we could get through this. Maybe we could be a family. Even if Sarah was in New York, even if things were messy. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was wrong, that Sarah wasn't telling us the whole truth, that there was something she was hiding, something that could destroy everything we'd built. We put off telling Jax about Sarah's move for 3 days, 3 days of pretending everything was fine, of trips to the park, of dinosaur-shaped grilled cheese sandwiches, of bedtime stories where the hero never had to say goodbye. But on Thursday night, as I tucked Jax into bed, he grabbed my wrist and said, "Why's Mommy been crying so much?" My throat tightened. He'd noticed. Kids always notice. Luke and Sarah were sitting on the couch in the living room, the air thick with tension. I led Jax out to join them, sitting him on my lap. Sarah's eyes were red, and Luke's hand was resting on his knee. A nervous habit he'd had since I met him. "Buddy," Luke said, his voice soft, "Mommy has something to tell you." Jax looked up at Sarah, his head tilted. "Did you get me a present?" Sarah laughed, a wet, shaky sound. "Not exactly, sweetie. I got a new job, in New York." Jax blinked. "Where's New York?" "It's a city far away," I said, squeezing his hand. "Like, farther than California?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "A little farther, but I'll come visit you every other weekend. And you can come stay with me during school breaks. We'll video call every night, I promise." Jax stared at her for a long time, his face blank, then he stood up, his hands balled into fists. "No," he yelled, "you can't go, you just came back." Sarah stood up too, reaching for him. "Jax, I have to." "You don't have to," he screamed, backing away from her. "You just don't want me. First you went to California, now you're going to New York. You hate me." Luke stood up, but Jax ran past him. Toward his room, I followed him, closing the door softly behind me. He was sitting on his bed, crying into his stuffed dinosaur, his shoulders shaking. I sat down next to him, pulling him into my lap. "It's not your fault, buddy," I said, rubbing his back. "Mommy doesn't hate you. She's just scared of missing a good job." "Then why can't she work here?" he asked, his voice muffled. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know she loves you, and I know Luke, and I will never leave you, never." He cried for a long time, until his eyes were red and puffy. I sang him the lullaby I used to sing when he was sick, off-key, just like always, and he fell asleep in my arms. When I carried him to bed and tucked him in, I kissed his forehead. "I'm here," I whispered, "always." When I walked back to the living room, Sarah was gone. Luke was sitting on the couch, a beer in his hand. "She left," he said, staring at the floor, "said she couldn't stay, that she didn't want to make it worse." I sat down next to him, taking the beer from his hand and setting it on the coffee table. "We should have told him together, all three of us. He feels abandoned." "Luke, again." Luke nodded, his face in his hands. "I know, I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to pick sides." "You don't have to pick sides," I said, "you just have to be here for him, for us." He looked up at me, his eyes red. "I am here, I'm trying, Mia, I really am." I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. "I know, I'm trying too." We sat there in silence for a long time, listening to Jax's quiet snores from down the hall. It felt like we were back to square one, hurt, confused, scared, but this time, we were together. That had to count for something. The next morning, Jax refused to get out of bed. He wouldn't eat breakfast, wouldn't talk, wouldn't even look at Luke when he tried to apologize. Sarah came over around noon, bearing Jax's favorite donuts, but he wouldn't open his door. "I'll talk to him," I said, taking the donuts from her. She nodded, her eyes filled with guilt. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you, Mia." I smiled weakly. "Me neither." I knocked on Jax's door, then opened it slowly. He was lying on his bed, staring at the wall. "I brought chocolate sprinkles," I said, holding up the donut. He didn't move. "I also brought a proposition. If you eat this donut, we can skip school today and go to the zoo. The new dinosaur exhibit opened yesterday. I heard they have a life-sized T-Rex." He turned his head toward me, his eyes narrowing. "Really?" I nodded. "Really, but only if you eat the donut. And maybe talk to your mom, just for 5 minutes." He thought about it, then sat up. "Okay, but if the T-Rex is fake, I'm not talking to anyone." The zoo was a good idea. Jax forgot about his sadness for a little while, pointing at the dinosaurs and telling me facts he'd learned from his books. "Did you know a T-Rex's teeth were as big as bananas?" he asked, his mouth full of donut. I shook my head. "No way, that's crazy." He grinned, and for a second, he was just a little boy. Not a kid who'd been hurt by too many goodbyes. Sarah met us there, and Jax let her hold his hand when we walked to the giraffe exhibit. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, after Jax went to bed, Sarah stayed for dinner. She made pasta, Jax's favorite, and Luke grilled chicken. We ate in silence, until Sarah put down her fork. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice tight. Luke and I looked at her, surprised. "It's not just the job," she said, staring at her plate. "I'm seeing someone, in New York." His name is Mark, he's my boss. My mouth dropped open. Luke sat up straight. You're moving for a guy? He asked, his voice sharp. Sarah shook her head. No, I'm moving for the job. But, he's part of it. We've been seeing each other for 6 months, since before I moved back to Chicago. I stared at her. 6 months. She'd been seeing someone for 6 months, and she'd never told us. She'd moved back to Chicago, pretending to miss Jax. When really she'd just been waiting for the promotion to come through. You lied to us, I said, my voice cold. You lied to Jax. You made him think you came back for him. But you were just biding your time. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I didn't lie. I do miss him. But I love Mark, too. I thought if I moved back, I could make it work. But I can't be in 2 places at once. Luke stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Get out, he said, his voice low. Luke. Please, get out. You've hurt him enough. You've hurt all of us enough. Sarah stood up, grabbing her purse. I'm sorry, she said, looking at me, for everything, for being selfish, for not seeing how good you are for Jax, for Luke. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, my heart cold. She walked to the door, then turned around. I'll still visit, every other weekend. Like I said, I'll be a good mom, I promise. Luke didn't say anything, and she left. Closing the door softly behind her, Luke and I sat in silence for a long time. The pasta was cold, the chicken untouched. I can't believe she lied, he said, finally. I shook my head. She's always been selfish, always put herself first. Luke looked at me, his eyes sad. What do we do now? I stood up, walking to Jax's room. He was asleep, his stuffed dinosaur clutched to his chest. I kissed his forehead, then walked back to Luke. We do what we've always done, I said. Sitting down next to him. We love him, we take care of him, we be his family. Luke took my hand, squeezing it tight. Together. I nodded. Together. That night, Luke and I lay in bed, listening to the rain hit the roof. I never thought it would be this hard, he said, his voice soft. I never thought we'd have to do this alone. I turned to him, kissing his cheek. We're not alone. We have each other, and we have Jax. He nodded, pulling me into his arms. I love you, he said. I love you too, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it with every fiber of my being. We didn't have all the answers, we didn't know what the future would bring, but we had each other, and we had Jax, and that was enough. The next morning, Jax woke up early, bouncing on our bed. Can we make pancakes? He asked, grinning. Luke laughed, sitting up. Only if you help, and only if you promise to go to school tomorrow. Jax nodded. Deal, but I want extra blueberries. Extra blueberries it is, I said, pulling him into a hug, as we walked to the kitchen. Jax holding Luke's hand and singing off-key. I looked out the window. The sun was shining, and the rain was gone. It wasn't perfect, it was messy, and complicated, and there would be more hard days ahead, but it was ours. And that was more than enough. Sarah left for New York 2 weeks later. She didn't have a big goodbye, just a quick hug for Jax before school, a mumbled I'll call to Luke, and a fleeting smile at me from the doorway. Jax didn't cry, he just squeezed his stuffed dinosaur tighter and walked to the bus stop without looking back. I watched him go, my chest tight, and Luke put his arm around my shoulders. He'll be okay, he said. I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I believed him. Our first family therapy session was the following Wednesday. Dr. Henderson's office was warm and cozy, with a couch for Luke and me and a bin bag chair for Jax, who spent the first 10 minutes picking at the threads on its cover. Let's start with feelings, Dr. Henderson said, leaning forward with a smile. How has everyone been feeling since Sarah moved? Jax didn't look up. Luke cleared his throat. I've been busy, trying to keep things normal for Jax. I squeezed Jax's hand. I've been worried about him. He doesn't talk about Sarah much. Dr. Henderson turned to Jax. What about you, buddy? How do you feel when you think about mommy living in New York? Jax finally looked up, his eyes shiny. I don't think about her, he said, crossing his arms. She left again, so I don't care. Luke winced. I knew it was a lie. Jax still checked his phone every night before bed, waiting for a video call that usually came late, if at all. Sarah had missed 3 nights in a row last week, saying she was swamped with work. The session didn't fix anything, but it was a start. Dr. Henderson suggested we make a memory jar for Jax, fill it with notes about fun times with Sarah, so he'd have something to hold on to when he missed her. That night, we sat at the kitchen table, Jax scribbling a drawing of the zoo on a piece of paper while Luke wrote down garlic bread sundae and I added bedtime stories about princess dinosaurs. Jax didn't smile, but he didn't throw the paper away either. Progress, Dr. Henderson would call it. Luke's work started to get chaotic that month. He came home late every night, his tie loosened, his face tight with stress. The company's merging with a firm in Boston, he told me one night, as we cleaned up Jax's bedtime snack. They're cutting positions, I might have to take a transfer to New York to keep my job. My heart dropped. New York, Sarah's city. The thought of moving there, of running into her at the grocery store or Jax's school, made my skin crawl. What about Jax? I asked. He just got used to things here. Luke ran a hand through his hair. I know, that's why I'm fighting it, but if I don't go, I might get fired. We can't afford that. Mia, I nodded, feeling helpless. We'd finally found a rhythm. School drop-offs together, Friday night pizza and movie nights, Jax's soccer games where we cheered so loud the other parents stared. Moving to New York would shatter that. And what if Sarah tried to weasel her way back into Jax's life full-time? She'd already been dropping hints about co-parenting more now that she was settled. Jax started acting out at school the next week. The teacher called me on Tuesday afternoon, her voice tight. He pushed a boy on the playground today, said the kid was making fun of his dinosaur backpack. I sighed. I'll talk to him. I'm so sorry. When I picked Jax up, he refused to look at me. He said Mommy doesn't love me, he mumbled, kicking a rock on the sidewalk, said that's why she left. My throat tightened. That's not true, buddy. Mommy loves you, she's just bad at showing it sometimes. He didn't respond. That night, I sat on Jax's bed while he colored. Do you want to talk about what happened at school? I asked. He nodded, his crayon pausing on the page. Tyler said his mommy never leaves him, that if my mommy really loved me, she'd stay. I pulled him into my lap. Tyler doesn't know your mommy. She has a job that's really important to her, but that doesn't mean she loves you less. And hey, look at me. I'm here. Daddy's here. We're not going anywhere, ever. He buried his face in my shoulder. Promise, I said, kissing the top of his head. Cross my heart. Luke came home late that night, smelling like bourbon. I got the transfer, he said, dropping his briefcase on the floor. New York starts in 6 weeks. I stared at him. 6 weeks. That wasn't enough time to pack, to find a new school for Jax, to say goodbye to the life we'd just built. Luke, we talked about this. I didn't have a choice. Mia, it's either New York or unemployment. He raised his voice, and Jax's door creaked open. He stood there, his stuffed dinosaur in hand, his eyes wide. Are we moving? He asked. Luke's face softened. Yeah, buddy, we are. To New York. You can visit Mommy more. Jax's face fell. I don't want to visit her. I want to stay here. He ran back to his room, slamming the door. Luke and I stood in silence. You should have talked to us first, I said, my voice cold. I didn't have time. The boss gave me an hour to decide. An hour. Luke, this is our family. Jax just got over Sarah leaving. Now we're uprooting him again. What were you thinking? He ran a hand through his hair, looking defeated. I was thinking about paying the bills, about keeping a roof over our heads. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm trying, I sighed. Walking to Jax's door, I knocked softly. Can I come in? He was sitting on his bed, crying into his pillow. I sat down next to him, pulling him into my lap. I know it's scary, I said, moving to a new place, starting a new school, but it won't be all bad. We can find a new zoo with a bigger T-Rex. We can make new friends, and hey, maybe we can get a dog, a puppy. You've always wanted a puppy. He lifted his head, his eyes red. Really, a real puppy? I nodded. Really, a real puppy. With floppy ears and everything. He smiled, just a little. Okay, but if the puppy pees on my dinosaur, I'm moving back. I laughed, wiping his tears. Deal. The next morning, we told Jax about the puppy plan over pancakes. He perked up immediately, asking a million questions. What kind of puppy? What would name it, if it could sleep in his bed? Luke relaxed, watching us. And I realized that's what we needed. Something to look forward to, something that was ours, not Sarah's, not Luke's job. Just us. After breakfast, Luke pulled me aside. "I'm sorry about last night," he said. "I should have handled it better. We'll figure this out, together." I nodded, kissing him. Together. That afternoon, Sarah called. Jax was at soccer practice, so I answered it. "Mia, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice urgent. "It's about Luke's transfer. You can't let him take Jax to New York." My heart skipped a beat. Why not? It's a good job. Because Mark's company is merging with Luke's. He's the one who pushed for the transfer. He wants Luke in New York so we can be a family, all four of us. I froze. Mark, the man she'd moved for, he wanted Luke in New York so they could be a family. What about Jax? What about me? Sarah, that's insane. Luke doesn't even know Mark. He will. Mark's his new boss. Mia, you have to stop him. Don't let him take Jax there. He'll regret it. She hung up, and I stood there, my hands shaking. For the first time since I'd come back from Switzerland, I felt that old fear creep in. The fear that Luke would choose Sarah over me, over us. But this time, I wasn't running. This time, I was fighting. For Jax, for Luke, for our family. Alright, that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We'll keep updating with more exciting stories, and we look forward to seeing you next time.